to tune into. It's time to get hungry for Let's Talk Wrestling on the Spinning Heel Kick podcast. It's time to tune into. It's time to get hungry for Let's Talk Wrestling on the Spinning Heel Kick podcast.
You know what time it is when you hear that lovely theme music of the podcast. It's the Spinning Heel Kick podcast, episode 15, and I have a very special guest with me on the podcast this week. I have the lovely DeonnaPurrazzo, and that name might sound familiar to you guys because she was recently on NXT, where she faced off against Asuka, and about a month or a month and a half ago, she was on NXT against Nia Jax. And if you only know her from NXT, that's okay. Like it's nothing wrong with that. But DeonnaPurrazzo has been killing it on the independent scene as of late, and she's regarded as one of the best female wrestlers in the world. And that's saying a lot because she's so young too. But she is one hell of a talent. Just one of the sweetest people in the world to talk to. I had a great conversation with her, about how she fell in love with wrestling and, how her training was. We talked a lot about RipRogers, and everybody loves RipRogers. If you don't follow RipRogers on Twitter, you need to go do that right now because he's, first off, one of the funniest guys that is on Twitter, plus one of the most informational or educational individuals that are involved in pro wrestling. This guy he knows it all. So I definitely suggest everybody out there to follow RipRogers on Twitter and follow DeonnaPurrazzo, of course. And it was really cool for me to sit down and talk with Deonna because she is on that. She's right there where she's about to make this next big step in her career. So to be able to catch her at this time and kind of discuss, her wrestling career so far and now where it's about to go, was really good, and it was a real nice conversation. And I chimed in on it too in the interview that I didn't want to talk about NXT with her, and people might be thrown off as to why I wouldn't want to talk about NXT with her and how did she get the call to come on NXT, how did she feel about the matches against Nia Jax and Asuka, and I had mentioned on the podcast too, it's like, it's cool that she's on NXT and she's getting that, people are taking notice of her who might have not heard of her before. But for me, we talked about it, and I think there's going to be a part 2 interview with Deonna. And I think that will be the time where we talk about NXT, because I think that's going to be the next chapter of her wrestling career. So for this episode, at least, I just wanted to talk about, her career so far. And then when the part 2 comes around, we'll talk about NXT. And, she might be on NXT permanently by the time we do a part 2 episode. So, that's why I wanted to just stick to the, what's been going on in her career so far. Her favorite matches, her favorite opponents, her training, talk about RipRogers. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. And I know, after listening to this episode, you guys are going to want more. And you will get more, once me and Deonna can figure out when we can do a part 2 to the episode. Because I feel like there's so much more we can talk about. So I hope you guys enjoy the interview. I think we're just going to jump into it. Because I'm super excited to release this episode. Because, she is definitely somebody that I've taken notice in the past 6 months or so. And I think she's a great talent. She has the brightest future ahead of her. And she has proven that to the world so far. And I'm very excited to see where her career ends up. And I have a good feeling where it will. I have my fingers crossed for her. And I think she's going to be very successful. So I hope you guys enjoy this interview with my girl, DeonnaPurrazzo. The RipRogers girl. And somebody that you will all know how great she is soon enough when you guys catch her on TV, winning championships and all that good stuff. So enjoy the interview. As always, follow me on Twitter at Spinning Heel Kick Pod, Facebook, the Spinning Heel Kick Podcast, Instagram is the Spinning Heel Kick Podcast. I have my website being built right now, so I'm hoping we can get that released in a couple of weeks. We're trying to evolve with the podcast. 2016 is coming up. It's time to take this podcast to the next level, just like DeonnaPurrazzo is going to do in her career, and take it to the next level and become one of the greats to ever do it. So here we go, DeonnaPurrazzo. And we're on with the Spinning Heel Kick podcast. I have a very, very special guest. I feel like all eyes are on her right now because she is the future of women's wrestling. I have DeonnaPurrazzo on the podcast. How are you doing,
Hi,
Deonna?
how are you?
I'm doing amazing. How you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
No, my first question is, how's the weather in Jersey right now?
The weather here is crazy. It's actually like 70 degrees. It's a beautiful day. And not an inch of snow on the ground. We haven't had snow all year yet. So, knock on wood, fingers crossed. But it's so weird here right now.
That's funny because like I literally woke up and it's storming out here in the Bay Area in California. So I'm like, I love the rain just because like it makes you want to be lazy and just watch Netflix all day. So I like woke up excited. I was like, yes, finally some rain out here because we're in a drought in California.
Yeah, no, I have an aunt who lives in Palm Springs, and she was like, "It's raining. It hasn't rained in 6 months." No, so it's just I feel like the weather is weird all over the place right now.
Yeah, it's that global warming. I tell you, the struggle is real. So that's a lovely way to start a podcast, talk weather. But I was actually before you called, I was watching your Homewreckers match with Nia Barella.
Yes.
I actually enjoyed that match quite a lot, and at the end I was kind of disappointed because I really wanted you to win. Like that's how the storytelling really got me, and I thought you would overcome it and you would win, but they ended up putting Nia over. How'd you feel about that match? Because it's so different from any other type of female wrestling match that you would see.
Right, it was hard. I was so excited when they asked us if we would like to be a part of something like that. So it was actually like a year in the making. And we just slowly built the whole story up of, she was marrying Mikey and he put her to the table and he accused her of cheating, but it was really him who was cheating on her with me, and I was, the homewrecker. So to be able to be a part of something like that, I don't know if it's been done in this area, in the main event, of the show. So it was really cool, especially because that's not so much my style and not something that I pride myself on. It's cool to like break my own boundaries a little bit and a little bit more of what I can do out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just adds more to your resume too. Like people can see what you've done and say, okay, well, if we ever need to put her in a match like that, like she can do it.
Yeah, and it was fun to put it together because we didn't want it to just be like we go out there and kill each other. We wanted to tell that story, and make people invested in it because we had never touched each other before. We didn't wrestle. This was like the culmination of everything the first time she would get her hands on me. So we wanted to tell a story, not just go out there and everything but the kitchen sink,
Yeah, exactly. And it's great to see it too because I feel like storytelling in like independent wrestling has been kind of like not consistent. So like to see that and actually have a full thought out story like as if it was a soap opera, like that was awesome to see that.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to be part of.
Oh, absolutely. So what was some of the things that really grasped you to like pro wrestling? Were you always a fan as a kid, or was it something that you just caught on to later on in life?
I started watching with my twin brother. We grew up on like a street with like all guys, and they always watched wrestling, but I had been around it, but I never really got into it. And I tell everyone, don't quote me, but it might have been Stone Cold hit Chris Jericho with a chair. There was a chair involved. That's all I know. And I was like, oh my God, why would they do that to someone? Like, how is he still alive? I didn't know. And I was like, oh my God, that's horrible. But something about it just intrigued me. And I was like, I need to know everything about this sport. I want to know everything. And then from there, I was 9 at the time, and then I saw the women do it, and I was kind of like, I'm going to do this one day. So I told my parents, and the rest is history, as they say.
I know, right? And it's really cool to see that. It's funny you had mentioned the chair. My first experience, and I've told this on the show before too, is I was about, I want to say 6 years old, And, I was supposed to be in bed by like 8 o'clock. But for some reason that night, I felt like wanting to become a rebel. So it was 9 p.m. I rolled out of bed, snuck into the living room, turned the TV on, and for some reason the channel was already on USA Network, and it was Monday Night Raw. And all I see is I don't remember if it was Triple H or Shawn Michaels, but one of them hit Undertaker with a chair, and Undertaker got cut open. And I was like, holy crap, this is awesome.
Yeah.
And ever since then, I've been hooked. Was there a time... Yeah. Who were some of your favorite wrestlers, like, growing up? I know you mentioned Stone Cold and some of the women wrestlers. What woman wrestler really caught your eye?
I loved Trish and Lita. That whole feud, and just them individually, like, Trish Stratus was my complete inspiration to be a wrestler. So Trish, but then I also watched Victoria and Jazz and Jacqueline, and everyone kind of like their own style. They're dominant women. So all of the divas in that time really drew my eye.
Yeah, and that diva division during that's because you're 21 years old, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm 25, so we kind of like grew up in the same kind of era. There was a point at time like women's wrestling was so like the roster was deep. So, like, every woman wrestler was out there, like, they looked great, but they were kicking ass, too. And it was really cool to see that time frame, because we did, I would say, like, 2005, 2008 or so, like, it just became about, like, swimsuit models and bikini contests and all that. And now, like, looking at it right now, like, they say it's a diva's revolution, and I don't like the term diva too much. But I really feel like there's a women's wrestling revolution going on, because throughout independent wrestling, like, there is so much talent out there, and you're one of them. And, I had mentioned that all eyes are on you. How do you feel about the current state of women's wrestling?
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because I'm not a big fan of the term diva either. I'm not a diva. I'm a women's wrestler.
I don't say women's wrestler. You're a wrestler.
Yeah, I mean, forget women. I'm a wrestler, period, I don't know why we have to sexualize it, but in terms of women's wrestling, yeah, I grew up watching Trish and Lita and, the hardcore matches that they did, and Trish, I think, is a one-time hardcore champion. Like, what other woman could say that? And then it became all about the swimsuit modeling and who was doing Playboy and the Playboy pillow fights and stuff like that. And that wasn't what I wanted to see, because I knew that women could do more. And now, we actually get wrestling and they get 10 minutes on TV. And that's, in the past few years, that's been so rare. So the term revolution it holds itself true. Because we've never seen something like this before. It's been so long, and it's all across the board. It's not just on TV, on Monday Night Raw or SmackDown. It's the independents too. Women are main eventing shows, and women are holding, heavyweight championships. So it's really great to see this kind of progression of women's wrestling.
Yeah, it's really neat, because like I'm grasping to like women's wrestling, and I would say in the past year I've become really intrigued and watching more women's wrestling. And before I didn't do that as much. But right now, like, the current state of it really caught my eye, and like I'm super into it. Because of this revolution that's going on in wrestling, how do you try to be different from anybody else? Because I think that's probably like the hardest part for anybody to do, is kind of differentiate yourself from everybody.
Yeah, it's been hard, and when I started out, I didn't really know like who I wanted to be. I wanted to just like be me, and I think as I've been more confident in my wrestling abilities, I've been able to separate myself in just the style that I'm trained in. I'm trained by DamienAdams and RipRogers, so super, super old school and like classic wrestling, tell a story, and that's what I try to integrate in everything that I do. I always say like work smarter, not harder. So why do I have to bump a million times to get a crowd behind me? I don't. If you take those small details and you use them to your advantage and you do them well, you don't have to go out there and kill yourself every night. You can tell a good story and get the crowd behind you with just basic 101 wrestling. And I think what I do that in every single match. And maybe I'm boring, but it works for me. And I think that's what makes me so different.
Yeah, exactly. I think it all depends on your style too, because like I hear people talk about like the fast paced wrestling, and kind of like wrestlers not selling the hits and everything. But if you think about it, like
Mm-hmm.
pro wrestling started with like the Harley races, the Ric Flairs and all
Exactly.
that. Like that was really slow paced wrestling, and fans were going they were going nuts over just a headlock that would be on for like 10 minutes. And
Yeah, and if you think about it too, like someone like, the Fabulous Freebirds, they didn't have to lock up. They were rock stars, but just their entrance was enough. And their entrance wasn't pyro and crazy music. It was one spotlight with them to the ring, Like things like that is the wrestling that I love now. Yeah, I grew up like a huge John Cena fan, and I loved Randy Orton because that was who, my Hulk Hogan were, my Ric Flairs. But now that I've learned so much about wrestling, I can really appreciate going back and watching like the NWA stuff, and stuff at the Sportatorium, because that's real wrestling in its purest form.
yeah, absolutely. What's some of your favorite like classic matches from those times in NWA?
Oh, Damien sends us so much stuff. And I watched so much, but I really, really love one match that always stands out to me is Hercules Hernandez versus Brad Armstrong. And I've probably seen it like 5,000 times, but it's just storytelling, and what is that, David versus Goliath is kind of what it is. So that match stands out to me. But some of my other favorites aren't still relatively new. Like I love watching Bret versus Owen Hart on WrestleMania 10. That's one of my favorite matches.
Yeah.
So I don't need to, it's not so old school. I like a lot of the newer stuff, but it's just, I don't know, I just love pure wrestling.
Yeah, I believe in that too, and that's something I kind of started appreciating when I got older, was going back and watching these old school matches. But you mentioned Damien a couple times already, so I wanted to talk about your training. So
Yeah.
you first started at D2W Pro Wrestling, correct?
Yes.
How was that training experience, and how did you go from just being a fan of the business and then saying, you know what, I'm going to do this and I'm going to make it happen, and then going out and finding a class or a school to get trained at?
It's really funny how it happened. My college is right past where D2W's facility was, so I took like a new way to school one day, and I saw this big poster outside of the American Legion, and it said pro wrestling first Friday of every month. So I didn't really know like what, I knew what indies were, but I didn't know like there were any in my area. So when I saw it, I was like, oh crap, I want to go to the show. And then I Googled it, and I saw Pro Wrestling Academy, and I was like, this is fate, I have to do this. So I went one Thursday. It was like December 27th, 2012 or something like that. And I signed up, and I went home, and I told my parents, like, hey, you're going to be a wrestler. And from then on, I just went, 3 days a week to train sit.
What would you say is like the hardest part about training to become a pro wrestler? Like, do you have any horror stories about the training?
So many people do, but I really personally don't. I had such great training from the beginning, and I've been with Damien since I started, so I know so many people that have so many like horror stories where they went, to so many different schools, and they had to bump 500 times, and I never had that. I guess the worst thing was, and it's not even a bad thing now that I think about it, I was treated like a guy. So everything that everyone else was doing, I was expected to do just as well. And I'm still one of the only girls that trains regularly with Damien. So I've kind of adapted so much of like his mannerisms, and I get told so much that I'm very Adams-esque. But to me, that's a compliment because he's trained me so hard.
Absolutely. So did you have matches after your training with D2W and then going to OV? Because you went to OVW to work with RipRogers, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Did you have matches after D2W before going to OVW?
Yeah, D2W runs the show, again, the first Friday of every month. So we had been there, and then we were just doing a lot of outside shows. So Damien was in OVW with Rip. So we had scheduled to go down and train with him a little bit. And we've had Rip up to Jersey for seminars, and we've gone to Canada with Rip to assist in the seminars. So I wasn't wrestling just with D2W. I was just kind of get my name out there and wrestle everywhere on the East Coast.
do you remember the feeling of finding out, that you're gonna have your first match, and how'd you feel about it, and then who'd you end up wrestling, and how'd you feel throughout that match?
I wrestled Jana for my first match, and I was fine up until, I guess 3 days before, because I cried for, 3 days straight, because I was so nervous.
Okay, was it, good tears, or you were just kind of scared, oh, shit, this is about to happen?
Yeah, I just had, those butterflies, and, I'm not a super emotional person, so when I get nervous, I don't really know what to do, so my instinct is to, cry. So I was ready for it to just happen. It was just I was kind of in a limbo period, and I just had to just do it to get over it,
Yeah, and how'd the match turn out? How'd you like it? Did you finish the match and say, look back at it and say, oh man, I could have done this differently. Maybe the finish could have been differently.
No, I look back and some people are like, oh, I had a really crappy first match, and I'm like, mine was pretty good. I was just happy that it was over, really. But now that it's not on video or anything, but what I can remember of it, I was pretty happy with it. I think it was a really good, first step, that first little thing to get over. Because since then, you just build your confidence and you build more knowledge, and I've been able to perform better and better every time.
Yeah, within time, it's just, I feel like for anybody in any job, you can be a garbage man, you can be anything. Within time and experience, you just develop your own style, and you get better every day through all the experiences that you have. Let's talk.
Exactly.
Let's talk Rip Rogers. How is it working with Rip Rogers? That man is a legend, and the fact everybody loves Rip Rogers, and he's hilarious on Twitter. This guy, I feel like I want to buy him a beer and just hang out with him and just hear the stories.
Well, he doesn't drink, so he won't take the beer.
I'll get him a juice. But how was it being able to hang out with him and learn from him, from somebody that has so much knowledge about the business?
It was really cool the first time that we went to OVW, because when I was younger, OVW was developmental, and I always said I want to go to the University of Kentucky, and I want to cheer, and I want to train at OVW. And, life happened, and that didn't happen, but to be able to step into the Davis Arena for the first time was just really mind-blowing to me, because it was a place I always wanted to be. I always wanted to be trained there and work there. So now thinking I've done that 4 or 5 times, it's a little bit of my dream come true, because that was part of what I always wanted to go through to get where I am today,
Yeah, absolutely. What was probably some advice that you received from Rip Rogers that really stood out to you, and something that you implement in your daily life and in wrestling?
Yeah, and we talk a lot, whether it's over the phone, Damien will call him or he'll call Damien, and I have his number, so I text him and ask him for advice and stuff, but, he's very, now more so relaxed, so he kind of just tells me, it is what it is, be confident now and be prepared for the unexpected. His thing is always to be prepared, not get prepared. And that's kind of the philosophy that he taught Damien, and Damien teaches me. So I just try to be ready for every situation, whether it's wrestling or life itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that too. I like the fact that you show so much love to him. Every wrestling match, I feel like you're wearing his shirt, the Hustler shirt.
Yeah, I am. Yeah, I wear it every single time I go out to the ring.
I think that's cool, because I don't ever see anybody doing that, shouting out their trainers or showing that support, because it's your trainers, it's the people around you, these positive influences that get you to where you want to be in your life. And the fact that you do that, and it's probably the littlest thing that you can do is wear his t-shirt, but it does so much, and I'm sure he's super proud of you.
Yeah, and to get the praise that I've gotten from someone like Rip is just incredible to me, because he doesn't do that for a lot of people. So for him to show that he really does believe in me means so much more. So even just to wear his t-shirt to the ring is the littlest, like you said, the littlest thing I could do is just to show him that I appreciate what he's done for me.
Yeah, and that just shows your personality too, and how humble, and I'm sure you're easy to train, because a lot of people from what I've heard, are not too easy to train, but you seem like you really are, and that's what's going to take you to the next level.
Yeah, and he's always taught me, and Damien the same, you learn something new every day, and you never stop learning in wrestling. There's no one way to do something, and everyone's going to have a different opinion. Damien's famous for saying it's like ice cream flavors. Everyone's favorite is different. So one person's going to say one thing, but someone else might say another, and you just have to go with the flow and adapt. So I've kind of just tried to keep my ears open and my mouth shut and take everything that I've learned from every person I've been around and learn one thing new from those people.
Yeah, that's a great way of going about things. You've wrestled all over the place, like in such a short time. How did it feel to finally get a call saying that, hey, we want you at TNA and we want you to go against Brooke?
Yeah, it was such like a last minute thing, but prior to that, I had done a seminar at DCW with Pat Kenny, who is in TNA's creative offices. So they called me and it was like, hey, could you be here tomorrow? So I was like, okay, no problem. And we flew down, but it was like an opportunity that I totally was not ready for, but I just had to do it, and I had to take that step. And I don't know if anyone else can say that their 8th wrestling match was on a pay-per-view.
I don't think so either. Like, that's rare to happen.
Yeah.
How'd you feel about that match, though?
Now I watch it, I look back and I'm like, oh, I didn't have really like proper gear. I didn't have like a character yet. I totally wasn't confident in myself yet. So, if I could go back and redo it, I think I would be a lot more happier as a whole. Not necessarily with the match, but just as my presentation. Because I was so new and I wasn't ready yet. But I had to be ready,
Yeah, and do you feel like those are one of those things that, you get thrown into the fire and it's, let's see if she, can get through it, and, even though you struggle, like, maybe that is going to help you become the wrestler that you eventually want to be?
Yeah, exactly. I learned a lot from, that 7-minute match, whatever it was, but Brooke helped me a lot learning what it is to wrestle on TV. Doing matches in front of, 100 people in a crowd, you're not working towards the camera, or you're not working the hard cam that has no people on that side, and you're not under all those lights and all that makeup, and, so it was a completely different world that I took advantage of learning, little tricks to turn towards the camera and things like that. So, in essence, it really prepared me for a lot more.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what it's all about. Like RipRogers says, right? Better to be prepared than not be prepared.
Yeah.
I was watching a few of your matches. I watched the one with Brooke, and then I watched the one that you had with Mandy Leon on Ring of Honor, the internet exclusive women's match, which I think was the first women's match, correct?
Yeah, that was the first Women of Honor match in like 2.5 years.
Yeah, and I thought that was a great match. I liked it a lot. I felt like the crowd wasn't into it as much as they should have, but I looked at the difference between the two matches, and you, even in the match against Mandy, like, you showed improvement. And I like your style, because what you said, like, you're like an old school throwback type of wrestler, and you don't see that with too many females. So I feel like you're really bringing that back.
Yeah, and it's simple things like targeting a body part, and it's just basic what you learn, your first month in wrestling, that if you do it well, it can work every single time. So again, I'm going to work smarter. I'm not going to kill myself, especially because this is what I want to make a career out of. I don't want to have to work a real job, one day. So I can't be doing flippity-doos and killing myself and crazy ladder matches or whatever people do now, taking crazy bumps, because what longevity does that give me? So that's kind of the approach that I have, and to be able to showcase that in Ring of Honor, and that was, the first time that my wrestling got showcased on such a high level since TNA. It was really great because people could see so much improvement.
What's some of your favorite matches that you have so far under your belt?
My favorite match, and it's not on YouTube, it's not anything. I actually wrestled Mike Mondo, for 1 hour. at a NYWC brought RipRogers up from Indiana, is where he lives. And I had met Mike 5 minutes before. And Rip was like, all right, you two get in the ring, 1 hour. Mike calls it, go. And it was like, wait, what? You know? And that is, no, it's not anywhere to watch, but that is my favorite match.
Wow, how was it doing a 1 hour match? Like, and you didn't know until 5 minutes before the match that it was going to be 1 hour?
No, I had no idea.
How do you like mentally prepare for that? Because that takes a lot.
And there was no preparing for it. It was just kind of like, you know, okay, Mike's gonna call it. I'm quiet. I'm listening. And it was perfect. I've done it with Damien 2 or 3 times since. And you would think it would be good because we know each other, we wrestle each other in training so much. But we had like little things that I wish could have gone better. But the match with Mike Mondo was just, there was no botches, there was nothing. It was perfection. So there was no way to prepare for it. I was just like, okay, let's go.
Wow.
Let me know what you want, you know?
I mean, things that you've done so far, I have never heard anybody else go through. Like, that's crazy that your 8th match is what ends up being on a TNA pay-per-view. And then 5 minutes before show's starting, you're in a 1 hour match with Mike Mondo.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really amazing. I had mentioned to you earlier that, you know, this podcast is, you know, really about, you know, uplifting the people out in the world to follow their dreams and, you know, get through the struggles that they might be going through. You know, what's some of the struggles that you've gone through, or some sacrifices that you had to make to reach your dreams and reach the point where you are right now?
You know what? I think I've always known that I wanted to be a wrestler, so I've prepared myself for in a lot of ways. Like I've always been an athlete. I was a cheerleader in elementary school and high school. I ran track. I played softball. I did a little bit of everything. And I knew that those less athletic abilities would help me when I got to this point. So I haven't had a lot of like hardships or struggles. Other than like, you know, like little nagging injuries and things like that, I have scoliosis. So I have 2 curves in my spine, and that hurt me more when I was growing up because we didn't know what was happening, like we didn't know what was causing the progression of the curves and things like that. So a lot of doctor's appointments and stuff. But now it's more of maintaining my routine in the gym and keeping myself healthy and strong so I don't have those injuries. That's really the biggest obstacle that I've had to overcome in my life in general. But as far as sacrifices, it's when people say it's not a career, it's a lifestyle, that is so true. Because my family suffers so much from our wrestling. I wrestle every weekend, 2 to 3 times a weekend, most weekends. So I'm not really around much, and I have like a 2-year-old nephew, and I don't get to see him as much as I want to. So I've sacrificed a lot of family time, and that really sucks because your family should come first, and that's really hard for me. And just friends. I have so many friends in college and so many friends in high school, and now I have like my 2 best friends, you know?
Yeah, let's get short real quick.
It's just having to handle it and balance, I guess, is the biggest obstacle at this point.
Yeah, and I think, you know, that's normal. You know, I'm sure your family understands that, you know, they might not see you often, but they're happy and proud to see you go out and fight for what you want. And then when you do have that time to spend with your family, it probably means the world to them, and, you know, it makes them quite, you know, excited to have you around.
Yeah, and I feel the same too. My parents know, and my brother and my nephew know what I'm doing and why I'm not there. And my dad, I was just on the phone with him earlier this afternoon, and he's like, my friend at work showed me your video. He is in that work. You know, it was so weird for like people to pull you up on their phone, but you're living your dream, and I'm so proud of you. So they know, like, hey, we haven't seen you in like a month, but you're out there and you're making it happen and you're living the dream that you always wanted. So they're super proud of me. I just wish, on a personal level, that I could be around more.
Yeah, absolutely. But I know you're just gonna keep fighting through and get to those dreams, and you're gonna make everybody around you so proud, your family and friends, because you have superstar written all over you, and that's me.
Oh, thank you.
That's me not talking as a podcaster. This is me talking as like a fan, because at the end of the day, I can ask you all the questions in the world, but I'm asking questions because I'm a fan, and I haven't seen a wrestler like yourself who's so young, but you're out there and you're well polished, and you can tell that you're going to continue to grow. And I kind of want to stay away from the questions about like NXT and all that stuff, because I feel like there's going to be another chapter of your wrestling career that's going to start soon. But so we'll hold that off for a part 2, hopefully.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a lot of fun to have that part 2 with you. Outside of wrestling, like I wanted to ask you, I like to ask some fun questions too. What are some things that you kind of do to decompress from like a long day of training, maybe just to get away and not think wrestling?
Yeah, just when I'm not wrestling, like you said, I'm with my family. It's hard for Damien and I because we spend so much time together wrestling. We don't really get to like go on dates, and we don't get to be like your normal couple. So we just we were just at lunch before I called you, and once we leave, we're gonna go see my family. So we just try to sleep and relax and spend time together and see each other's families and enjoy the time that it's not about wrestling, because during the week we're training 3 days a week and we both have real jobs, and we have so much going on that on a Sunday, today's a perfect example. It's like, hey, let's go have lunch and talk. How was your week? But I'm a big history buff. I love, we both love, Western movies, newly redone Western movies. And I love to read. I'm an avid reader. I'm always on my phone reading, a book or something. And, yeah, I don't know. I'm a big cheering fan, so I watch, a ton of, All-Star Cheerleading, and I'm a Patriots fan, so I'm trying to watch the game tonight. And hopefully we, get that win. But just, I'm like everyone else. I'm just average. I have my hobbies, and when I have time, I like to enjoy them.
So you mentioned the Patriots. You're talking to a St. Louis Rams fan. And I'm still a little bit heartbroken from that Super Bowl where Vinatieri hits the game winner. So,
oh yeah,
I don't know how I feel about this anymore.
And it's funny too, because I was in Connecticut last night, and I wore a Patriots sweatshirt, and everyone was like, "Oh, we're Jets fans," and I was like, "This is up north. I thought you would all be Patriot fans, but I guess not."
That's hilarious. So we're coming down to the end of the podcast, and this was such a great conversation. I really enjoyed talking to you, but I truly feel like there's so much more to you that we can do a 2-hour podcast. But like I said, I really believe there's going to be a new chapter coming into your career, and I'm going to be the first one to reach out to you and say, hey, let's get on part 2. Before we close out, where can fans find DeonnaPurrazzo on social media, in different promotions? Do you have anything that you can plug in?
Yeah, next Friday I will be in Queens, New York for GCW. And then, that's next Friday on the 18th. And then Saturday I will actually be at Ring of Honor. We're doing a Women of Honor tag match. So it's me and Hanaya the Huntress versus Mandy Leon and Sumi Sakai. So I'm really excited for that. And then that's my last match of the year. So we're kind of finishing it really big. And everyone can follow me on Twitter at DeonnaPurrazzo, as well as it's the same on Facebook and Instagram too.
You heard it there, listeners. DeonnaPurrazzo, the RipRogers girl, the future of pro wrestling. And literally, she is the future of pro wrestling, because the next time me and Deonna are going to have a conversation, she's going to be on the next level of pro wrestling, and I really, really believe that. Thank you so much for, coming onto the podcast. You were on my short list of wrestlers that I really wanted to interview, and you lived up to my hype, so I really appreciate you coming on and spending time and talking wrestling with me.
No, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. DeonnaPurrazzo.